Well, how do we determine? I mean, I'm a market researcher, so I do market research on that very topic. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking about today is that if we simply pay attention to what the media is talking about, we can be frequently misled about what is important to the consumer. And when I say important, something that they're going to pay for. So I did a study this past year for Alma, where we were taking a look at a variety of variables in terms of how important they are. Things like being hormone and antibiotic free, having good animal welfare practices, environmental practices, those types of things. We had a whole variety of things that we were testing. And two of the things that we found when it comes right down to it, consumer price is obviously very important, and country of origin. Those two things, very, very, well, no, maybe not just country of origin. So in this particular case, we were testing the product of Canada. A lot of these other factors, like the hormone, antibiotic-free, organics, animal welfare, a lot of those, while they're important, at this point in time for the broad-based Canadian consumer, most are not prepared to pay a premium for. So how do we determine? You know, in my field, we do it through market research because, and I think I'm commissioned to do that because there's so much media clutter out there. People that I do my work for are sometimes trying to figure out what is important. So let's go back to the consumer and find out.
So when you mentioned origin. Now, when you talk about origin, do you mean traceability, that aspect of it, or do you mean just country?
Just in this particular case, we were testing. I'm not going to go into the research method we used, but we were testing product of Canada and product of US and the beef. We tested other proteins, but in the beef specifically, it was Canada or US. And so that's what I mean by origin. However, one of the things I'm going to be talking about in my talk today is that being local or where the stuff is coming from is going to be, is going to be growing in importance. And simply being a product of Canada is not enough. I mean, if we're sitting in Ontario, Ontario is a huge market, but Toronto as a city is a huge market. I mean, the reality is, if we were shipping beef out from New York, it's a whole lot closer than shipping it from Alberta, right? I mean, one of the reasons people like Canadian beef is they somehow, in Canada, they feel it's fresher because it doesn't have to travel so far. But, traveling from Alberta to Ontario or Quebec is far. Well, one of the things as part of my talk is, and I'm supposed to give some ideas about what's going to be important 5 to 10 years out, which is not really that far. And one of the key things I'm sort of spending some time talking about is the 20-year-old demographic, that particular consumer, 20 to 25-year-old. Typically, the work I do in the beef industry, we don't really worry too much. They're not our key target. Key targets tend to be moms, not just moms, but that, we'll call it, let's say 25 to 49-year-old who's raising a family, who's shopping every day. They are, volumetrically a huge chunk of the market, so they're our key target. However, if we want to take a look at what's going to be important, let's talk to these 20 to 25-year-olds because they do have different ideas. They're a lot more negative, a lot more critical, even when they're a beef eater. They're more negative and critical of the beef industry, but we also know their industry and critical and negative about poultry. It's just sort of part of their, call it quirks, but by keeping tabs on what's important to them, I think that will help us identify what the trends going forward are. That is one of the other trends. I don't know if it's a trend, but something I'm hoping to put out there to remind people. There is so much negative publicity circulating around the beef industry. So much. Every time you turn around, as you say, Oprah, YouTube. I remember a couple years ago, I Googled beef slaughter, and I got 75 YouTube videos that came up when I Googled. That was a couple years ago. I can't even imagine now. So there's been all kinds of books and movies written, these sort of documentary things. So there's so much negative publicity. So one of the things I continue to say is you have to put out positive messaging about the beef industry, about beef as a product, and also the beef industry, but particularly beef. Remind people that there's all kinds of health attributes of eating beef. And that's BIC, the Beef Information Center, now Canada Beef. I do a lot of my work for them, and that is a lot of what they have been tasked to do. Unfortunately, advertising dollars are way down, and so they have to approach it through new methods or social media methods of getting positive messages about beef out there. I hope so. I really hope so. I hope that they continue to see the importance of talking to the consumer. I know some of their focus has been diverted away from the consumer and into other aspects to support the industry, but we can't walk away from the consumer because ultimately they're the ones buying it. And as I said, there is so much negative media around the industry, and there's so many great things about beef. Like, we can't forget that, but the consumer will forget it if they're not reminded. Well, I think it's a mix, but I absolutely think that, consumer trends come from all over the place, but personally, I think the grocery chains, follow demands. My topic is what is the consumer demand from the beef industry, and what consumer demands is what they're going to get. I think there's a lot of influences on trends, and as I was saying earlier, if we simply paid attention to what the media is telling us is really important, we would be misled, because ultimately the consumer votes with their dollars, and as much as they think some of these what I'll call more ethical considerations are important, they're not currently necessarily being prepared to pay for them. However, I've done a lot of research for BIC to suggest that those areas are very important for consumers' impressions of the industry, and ultimately, if they're not satisfied with an industry, they end up stopping eating that particular product if it goes to that far. I would say yes, I do think that's number one. I'm not going to say that's where they're prepared to spend their money. The work that I do, and my whole background, I've been a consumer marketer. I do a lot of research in the consumer world. That's where my focus is. I'm not saying it's not without challenges. I'm not saying that a dollar spent in advertising is a dollar back. It's very, very hard to reach consumers with a positive message. But I don't think you can walk away from that and expect consumers to continue to eat beef. We heard it today. The category has been in decline. And there are reasons for that, but if we want to turn that around or even keep it flat, consumers have to be reminded of all the reasons why they eat it, beyond the fact that it tastes great. There's a lot of health attributes and healthy reasons why they should be eating it.